The Crypto Markets Update is presented by Grayscale, the world's largest digital currency asset manager.
Quick check-in on Bitcoin. Right now, the CoinDesk Bitcoin price, XBX index trading at $56,756. Bitcoin slightly up about 0.3%. The CoinDesk Ether price, ETX index, is at $4,584. ETH climbing about 1.2%. The new DFX CoinDesk DeFi index is down about 1.4%. Trading at 545 points. Joining us now to discuss the crypto markets is Mark Elenowitz, president of trading software firm Horizon Fintex. Hello there, Mark. Happy Friday. So we've been seeing a narrow trading range for Bitcoin all week long. When do you see a breakout, either up or down?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with what's going on now with the Omicron story. We saw Bitcoin get a little bit stopped in its tracks this week after it started coming under pressure because we're just not quite sure what's happening in the world related to now where we're going to see this COVID outbreak. And now we saw it here in the United States. It's actually come out and seems to be in over 12 states and expanding rapidly. Same thing is going on. What we're seeing kind of the opposite, though, is in the Ethereum pricing because everything related to the NFT market, and we're starting to see new highs. So I think Bitcoin itself is just going to continue to hover around here. Your last guest, I think he hit it on the head. We're going to start seeing Bitcoin trend up over the next several months, and looking into 2022, I think it's going to be a pretty good year.
So, Mark, what kind of catalysts are you expecting to actually move things? Because we did have this Omicron variant news come out last week. About a week ago, we saw prices dip. We saw the amount of open interest in the perpetual futures market take a small dip. It wasn't that much relative to the overall size. And the overall size of that perpetual futures market is pretty high. So, I mean, what's going to ultimately move the price of Bitcoin if it's not necessarily Omicron right now, and if it's not necessarily inflation worries? Where does it happen?
Well, I think it's ultimately regulation. I know a lot of people don't look at it that way, but we've seen Gensler here in the U.S. make some comments. I would not describe him as a fraud, like your last guest. I think that's a pretty gutsy move. I think it's really important as a whole that we look for regulation. We're seeing more and more investors, retail investors, get involved in this marketplace, whether we're talking Bitcoin or Ethereum or Dogalong or Dogecoin or Shiba Inu or any of these coins. It's starting to create problems where retail investors are jumping in. It's like what we used to see in the regular stock market back in the 90s when you'd be riding and somebody's talking about how they're trading $100 worth of AOL in their day trading accounts. So I think as we see regulation and we see things are more clearly defined from a standpoint of these cryptocurrency firms, as are they deemed to be securities? Are they deemed to be broker-dealers? And where that regulation and where that comes out. And the reason I'm saying this back to Bitcoin, I know we like to look at it as it shouldn't really be tied into it. Ultimately, these markets are going to be dictated based upon regulation, whether it's here in the U.S. or in other marketplaces. And that would then ultimately allow ease of use for retail investors to become able to come into the market, trade these currencies, trade these asset classes, and be able to buy them for their portfolio. We're seeing more and more institutional interest grow. We see a lot of retail interest grow, but really mainstream America still hasn't adopted it yet. So I think that would propel additional buying, ultimately driving prices higher or lower.
So it's really interesting because we've had a bunch of guests on the show, including our last guest and you, who are kind of signaling this regulatory, I guess, crackdown or tightening in the United States. Yet at the same time, we're also having a bull market. We've seen Bitcoin and Ether hit new all-time highs. So I guess the question is like, how do you square those two narratives? Is it that there's sort of a regulatory crackdown, but like people aren't really aware of it? Or is it the idea that these coins would actually be much higher if regulations were more friendly? Because they seem like two different narratives, right? Like, how is the US cracking down on Bitcoin, yet Bitcoin is still soaring? Like, why? How do you square those two things?
Well, so let's move away from Bitcoin for 1 second. Just talk about the irrational exuberance of some of these coins. I mean, I was getting my haircut last week, and my barber put in $2,000, and he thought he hit the gold mine because he made $60,000 on his I think it was Dogalon coin. I mean, that is just nonsense, because what it is, it's a bubble, it's a pyramid, it's what we call in the regular marketplace is pump and dumps. At some point, the music's going to stop, and these coins that don't really have any utility function and nothing that will be able to provide ultimate value is going to pull out. That's where regulation needs to come in. When you look at something like Shiba Inu, and then you see AMC now saying they're going to accept it to be able to buy movie tickets, I mean, to me, it's just crazy, because people don't understand the transaction costs and the fees associated with doing that. But when you look at ETH as an example, to me, now that's something where, again, let's tie back regulation. I think some of the moves are what we're seeing in the NFT space, where NFTs as a whole are really exciting. It's a transition. It's more so, in our belief, what we're doing at Upstream. And we are, by the way, a regulated stock exchange. We're probably the only national securities exchange in the world that's powered by the blockchain. And what I mean by that is we actually sell securities. These are not the cryptocurrencies, but these are tokenized asset classes that are equities, including NFTs, including being able to fractionalize an NFT. So allowing every investor the opportunity to own fractional ownership in some of these really expensive apes and the other things that we see in CryptoPunks. Come back to regulation, and now what you're looking at, where you see all these marketplaces like OpenSea and the others that are unregulated, allowing retail investors to come in. Once we see a regulation and more definition of terms, whether it's taxation, whether it's investor protection related to Bank Secrecy Act, all that will ultimately dictate into price. So ETH is rising because everybody's buying NFTs. That's at least my opinion. And I think we're going to continue to see that. And I think what we'll see is a rise in more utility type functioning coins. And I think we're going to see contraction in these coins that really have no other purpose other than some famous guy here in the US who might tweet about it, and suddenly everybody thinks it's the next greatest thing.